She was just supposed to pour the bourbon, but when Harper Quinn heard the whisper of an execution behind the velvet curtain, the silver tray rattled violently in her bruised hands. The city's most ruthless crime lord looked up. He didn't see a clumsy waitress. He saw his salvation. The air inside the Onyx Club in downtown Chicago always smelled of expensive mistakes, a heavy blend of aged scotch, imported Cuban cigars, and desperation hidden behind tailored Armani suits. For Harper Quinn, it was just a place to survive. She was 24, drowning in a sea of past due notices, and bound to a man who preferred to speak with his fists rather than his words. The fading purple bruise along her left cheekbone, clumsily hidden beneath layers of cheap drugstore foundation, was a testament to Trevor Walsh's temper from 2 nights prior. Harper kept her head down, her uniform immaculate, and her mouth shut. That was the golden rule of working VIP service at a club unofficially owned by the Lombardi crime family. You didn't look the bosses in the eye, and you certainly didn't listen to their conversations. Tonight, the VIP lounge was suffocatingly tense. Gabriel Lombardi sat at the head of the heavy mahogany table. At 32, Gabriel was not the stereotypical, cigar-chomping mobster of the old movies. He was ruthlessly modern. He had inherited his father's empire 3 years ago and had methodically sanitized it, hiding the blood money behind real estate shell companies and venture capital firms. He was strikingly handsome, but his eyes were entirely dead twin chips of dark flint that seemed to calculate the exact cost of a human life in real time. Harper hated serving his table. Her hands, already prone to shaking from the anxiety that perpetually vibrated in her chest, always betrayed her when she was near him. "More ice, Harper," Nathaniel Cross, Gabriel's underboss, snapped, snapping his fingers without looking up from his phone. Nathaniel was a sharply dressed man with a restless energy that made Harper's skin crawl. "Right away, Mr. Cross," Harper murmured, backing away with her silver tray. She hurried down the dimly lit, narrow service hallway that ran parallel to the VIP rooms. It was heavily soundproofed, a necessary architectural feature for men who discussed felonies over filet mignon. Harper filled a crystal bucket from the industrial ice machine, the cold biting into her already aching knuckles. As she walked back, pausing by the heavy oak door of the private humidor, a room adjacent to Gabriel's table, she heard the harsh, hushed hiss of a voice. The door hadn't fully latched. It was cracked open just a fraction of an inch, but in the dead silence of the service corridor, the words bled through clearly. It was Nathaniel Cross. "I don't care about the collateral, Silas," Nathaniel was whispering, his voice laced with manic urgency. "The explosive is wired to the ignition of the Aston Martin. The second Gabriel turns the key tonight, it's done. The Chicago syndicate belongs to us by midnight." Harper froze. Her blood turned to ice water, chilling her far deeper than the bucket in her hands. A bomb. They were going to kill Gabriel Lombardi tonight. "Just make sure his driver, Leo, isn't the one bringing the car around," Nathaniel continued. "Gabriel has to be in the driver's seat. Make the call to the valets. Pay them off." Harper couldn't breathe. The air in her lungs felt like shattered glass. She took a step back, desperate to retreat to the kitchen, to pretend she was deaf, dumb, and blind. But her foot caught the edge of the frayed service carpet. She stumbled. She didn't fall, but the heavy silver tongs resting on the rim of her ice bucket slipped. They clattered to the hardwood floor with a sharp, metallic clang that echoed through the narrow hallway like a gunshot. The whispering inside the humidor stopped instantly. Harper dropped to her knees, her trembling hands scrambling blindly for the tongs in the dim light. Tears of pure terror pricked her eyes. "They're going to kill me. They're going to open the door. And they're going to kill me." She snatched the tongs, standing up so fast her head spun. She turned to run, but a shadow fell over her. It wasn't Nathaniel stepping out of the humidor. It was Gabriel Lombardi. He had come out of the main VIP room, standing at the far end of the hallway, directly in her path. He had seen her kneeling by the humidor door. He had seen her violently shaking hands. And in the harsh downlight of the hallway sconce, as she looked up at him in sheer panic, he saw the heavy bruising covering the left side of her face. Gabriel didn't yell. He didn't pull a weapon. He merely tilted his head, his dark eyes locking onto hers with a predatory stillness. He took a slow step toward her. Behind the humidor door, the handle rattled as Nathaniel prepared to investigate the noise. Gabriel moved with terrifying speed. In 3 silent strides, he was in front of Harper. His large, calloused hand clamped over her mouth, muffling the scream that died in her throat. His other arm wrapped around her waist, lifting her off her feet. He dragged her backward into the dark alcove of the linen closet, pulling the slatted door shut just as Nathaniel stepped into the hallway. Through the wooden slats, Harper watched Nathaniel look up and down the empty corridor, a paranoid scowl on his face. After an agonizing 10 seconds, Nathaniel muttered a curse and walked back into the VIP room. In the pitch-black closet, Harper was hyperventilating against Gabriel's leather-gloved hand. She smelled of cheap vanilla perfume. He smelled of bergamot, gunpowder, and danger. "If I remove my hand," Gabriel whispered, his voice a smooth, lethal baritone vibrating against her ear, "are you going to scream?" Harper shook her head frantically, tears spilling over his fingers. He slowly lowered his hand, though he didn't release her waist. The space was so cramped she was pressed flush against his chest. She could feel the steady, unnervingly calm beat of his heart. "You're the waitress." "Harper," he said, stating a fact, not asking a question. "You were listening at the door." I wasn't." The tongs fell, she stammered, her whole body vibrating with tremors she couldn't control. Gabriel reached up, his thumb gently tracing the edge of the dark purple bruise on her cheekbone. She flinched violently, expecting a strike. Instead, his touch was bizarrely clinical. "Whoever gave you this," Gabriel murmured, his eyes adjusting to the dark, scanning her terrified face, "did a sloppy job. But you didn't flinch when Nate walked out. You flinched when you saw me, which means you heard what my underboss was saying." He leaned in closer, until she could feel his breath on her collarbone. "Tell me exactly what you heard, Harper. Your life depends entirely on your memory for the next 30 seconds. He said the Aston Martin," Harper choked out, the words tumbling from her lips in a desperate rush. She was terrified of him, but the cold certainty in his eyes told her that lying would result in a quiet disappearance into the Chicago River. "He told a man named Silas that the explosive is wired to the ignition. He said you have to be the one to turn the key. He's paying off the valets." Gabriel went completely rigid. For a fraction of a second, the mask of the untouchable crime boss slipped, revealing a flash of genuine, lethal fury beneath. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a terrifying, calculating calm. Nathaniel, the man who had been his father's protege, the man Gabriel had trusted to manage the port authorities. A betrayal from the inner circle wasn't just an insult. It was a systemic failure. "Why are your hands shaking so badly?" Gabriel asked, seemingly changing the subject entirely. I'm scared," she whispered. "You were shaking before you heard the conversation," he noted, his sharp eyes missing nothing. He looked at the bruise again. "Boyfriend? Husband? Ex-boyfriend," she corrected, shame burning through her terror. "Trevor. Does Trevor know you work here?" "No. He thinks I work at a diner." Gabriel was quiet for a moment, processing the variables. A normal boss would put a bullet in her head to ensure there were no loose ends. But Gabriel Lombardi was a pragmatist. Nathaniel's betrayal meant Gabriel's entire security detail was compromised. He didn't know who was loyal to him and who was waiting for the explosion. He needed to leave the building immediately, but he couldn't leave through his usual channels, and he couldn't take his usual men. He needed an anomaly, a distraction. "All right, Harper," Gabriel said, finally stepping back, giving her an inch of breathing room. "You and I are going to make a deal. I am going to walk out the front door of this club in exactly 3 minutes, and you are going to be on my arm." "What?" "No, I can't. I'm on shift, the manager. If you stay here," Gabriel cut her off, his tone flat, "Nathaniel will eventually check the security cameras to see what made that noise. When he sees you hovering by the door, he won't ask questions. He will simply have you killed. Do you understand?" Harper swallowed hard, her mouth bone dry. She nodded. "Good. Furthermore, you just handed me the keys to my own survival. I always pay my debts." He looked down at her battered face. "Walk out of here with me. Help me bypass Nathaniel's trap, and I will make sure Trevor never lays a hand on you or anyone else ever again. Your debts, your fears, your miserable little life. I'll wipe the slate clean. But you belong to me for the next 48 hours until I secure my throne." It wasn't a request. It was a silent, ironclad contract. "What do I have to do?" she whispered, the survival instinct overriding her panic. "Take off your apron," he commanded. Harper unclipped the black apron, dropping it onto the floor of the closet. Gabriel shrugged off his custom-tailored suit jacket, a piece of clothing worth more than her car, and draped it over her shoulders to hide her white uniform shirt. The heavy wool smelled of him, warm and masculine, engulfing her small frame. We walk out together. You look down, you lean into me. If anyone asks, you're my new entertainment for the evening. If Nathaniel sees us, you let me do the talking. He pushed the closet door open. The hallway was empty. Gabriel took her hand. His grip was firm, surprisingly warm, anchoring her trembling fingers. They walked out of the service corridor and into the pulsating neon-lit chaos of the main club floor. The heavy bass of the music vibrated through Harper's chest. She kept her head down, her hair falling to obscure the bruised side of her face, clinging to Gabriel's arm as if he were a life raft. As they neared the front entrance, a voice cut through the music. "Boss, leaving early?" It was Nathaniel. He stepped out from the VIP corridor, flanked by two massive enforcers. His eyes darted to Harper, narrowing as he took in the oversized jacket and her hidden face. "Who's the girl?" Harper's heart slammed against her ribs. She squeezed her eyes shut. Gabriel didn't miss a beat. He let out a low, easy chuckle that sent shivers down Harper's spine. It sounded incredibly genuine. "A little local flavor, Nate. It's been a long week. I'm taking the rest of the night off." Nathaniel forced a smile, but his eyes were scanning Gabriel aggressively. "Of course. Let me have the valet bring the Aston Martin around. You'll want to ride in style." "Actually," Gabriel said smoothly, casually adjusting his grip on Harper's waist, pulling her flush against his side, "she lives on the south side. The Aston is too flashy for those streets." I called Leo directly. He's pulling the backup SUV to the rear alley. "I'll see you tomorrow, Nate. Handle the Sokolov account while I'm indisposed." Nathaniel's smile faltered slightly. "The rear alley? Boss, security protocol." "I write the protocols, Nathaniel," Gabriel interrupted, his voice dropping an octave, laced with a sudden, freezing authority that demanded absolute obedience. "Good night." He didn't wait for a response. Gabriel steered Harper toward the heavy brass front doors, slipping through the velvet ropes. They burst out into the frigid Chicago night air. The cold hit Harper like a slap, clearing the fog of panic from her brain. Gabriel didn't lead her to the rear alley, as he had told Nathaniel. He pulled her aggressively down the sidewalk, blending into the crowds of late-night pedestrians, moving fast. "Keep walking," Gabriel muttered into her ear. "Don't look back." 2 blocks down, a sleek, unmarked Blacktown car pulled out from a side street, tires squealing slightly as it stopped right beside them. The back door flew open. "Get in," Gabriel ordered. Harper scrambled into the leather interior, Gabriel sliding in right behind her and slamming the door. The car sped off into the night before they were even fully seated. In the driver's seat, a massive, older man with a scarred neck glanced in the rearview mirror. "Where to, mister?" "Lombardi." "The safe house in Evanston, Leo," Gabriel said, leaning back against the seat, loosening his silk tie. He looked over at Harper, who was curled into the corner of the seat, still wearing his jacket, trembling violently as the adrenaline began to crash. "We avoided the Aston," Gabriel said quietly, his dark eyes fixed on her. "You kept your nerve. You did well, Harper." "So, I can go home now?" she asked, her voice cracking. Gabriel looked out the tinted window at the passing city lights, his expression hardening into a mask of pure vengeance. "No. Nathaniel will realize the car bomb failed in a matter of hours. He'll start hunting for me, and he'll hunt for anyone who left with me. Going home is the fastest way to get yourself killed." He turned back to her, the reality of her new world crashing down around her. "Your old life died the second you dropped those tongs, Harper. Welcome to the family." The safe house wasn't a dilapidated warehouse or a smoky basement. It was a $15 million brutalist concrete, and glass mansion perched on a private cliffside stretch of Sheridan Road in Evanston, overlooking the churning black waters of Lake Michigan. The juxtaposition of the serene architectural beauty and the violence it was designed to harbor made Harper's stomach churn. As soon as they stepped inside, the house came alive. Biometric scanners beeped, heavy steel deadbolts engaged with a sickening thud, and the floor-to-ceiling windows were instantly obscured by automated blackout shades. "Leo, perimeter check." "Boot up the ghost servers," Gabriel commanded, shrugging off his shoulder holster and dropping it onto a pristine white marble kitchen island. He turned to Harper, who was still shivering in his oversized coat, clutching it around herself like armor. "Sit." He pointed to a modern leather sofa. Harper obeyed instantly. She felt entirely unmoored, as if she had stepped off the edge of the earth and into a parallel universe where the laws of society were rewritten in blood and shadow. Gabriel walked to a recessed liquor cabinet, poured 2 fingers of neat Lagavulin into a crystal tumbler, and brought it over to her. "Drink. It helps with the shock," he instructed. Harper took it with both hands, the glass rattling against her teeth as she took a sip. The liquid burned a fiery path down her throat, but it did force the violent trembling in her limbs to subside slightly. Gabriel pulled up a heavy accent chair and sat across from her. He leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. In the harsh, bright LED lighting of the living room, he looked less like a phantom and more like a soldier preparing for a siege. "Let's talk about the variable," Gabriel said, his voice a low, steady drone. "Trevor. What is his last name?" "Miller," Harper whispered, staring at the amber liquid in her glass. "Trevor Miller." Gabriel tapped an earpiece he had just inserted. "Leo. Run a full background on a Trevor Miller. Cross-reference with Chicago PD databases and our own payroll ledgers. Look for aliases." Harper looked up, confused. "Payroll ledgers?" "Trevor works at an auto body shop in Logan Square. He's a mechanic. He has a gambling problem. That's why we were always broke. That's why he hit me." Gabriel's expression remained entirely impassive, but his eyes darkened. "Men who hit women rarely do it just because they lose money, Harper. They do it because they are fundamentally weak. But in my world, there are no coincidences." 10 minutes later, Leo walked into the living room, holding a matte black tablet. The massive bodyguard looked grim. "You called it, boss," Leo rumbled, handing the tablet to Gabriel. "Trevor Miller. Also known on the street as T-Bone. He's not just a mechanic. The auto shop is a front for a chop shop, but his primary income? He runs a low-level wire room for illegal sports betting." Gabriel swiped through the tablet, his jaw tightening. "Whose territory?" "South Side," Leo replied. "He kicks his envelope up to a lieutenant named Dominic Rossi. And Rossi kicks up to Nathaniel." The silence in the room was deafening. Harper felt the blood drain from her face. The room spun. "Trevor works for Nathaniel?" she gasped, her voice barely audible. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The man who had terrorized her, the man she had taken a second job at a dangerous Mafia club just to pay off his debts, was employed by the very underboss who had just tried to assassinate Gabriel Lombardi. "Worse," Gabriel said coldly, setting the tablet down. "He wasn't just a runner. Look at these financials." He pointed to a graph on the screen that Harper couldn't read. Trevor was skimming from Nathaniel's pot. A lot of it. Nearly 50 grand over the last 6 months. Gabriel stood up, pacing the length of the room. Nathaniel isn't an idiot. If someone is skimming 50 grand, Nathaniel knows about it. He wouldn't just let Trevor live, unless Trevor offered him something of equal or greater value to pay off the debt. Gabriel stopped pacing and looked directly at Harper. The intensity in his gaze was terrifying. "You started working at the Onyx Club exactly 3 months ago, Harper. Right when Trevor's skimming got discovered. How did you get the job?" I saw an ad online," Harper stammered, frantically trying to remember. "But Trevor pushed me to apply. He said the tips were incredible. He said it would solve all our problems." Gabriel let out a harsh, bitter laugh that held no humor. "He didn't just push you. He sold you." Nathaniel needed eyes and ears inside the club's staff. Someone disposable. Someone whose strings could be easily pulled. Trevor offered up his beautiful, terrified girlfriend as a pawn to erase his own debt. Harper dropped the crystal tumbler. It shattered on the hardwood floor, the expensive scotch pooling around the shards. She didn't notice. A sob ripped from her throat, a sound of pure, unadulterated betrayal. She had been a piece of meat, traded on a chessboard she didn't even know existed. Gabriel stepped over the broken glass. He knelt in front of her, his large hands gripping her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. "Cry for the betrayal later," Gabriel commanded, his voice sharp but anchoring. "Right now, you need to understand the tactical reality. Nathaniel knows exactly who you are. He knows you were working tonight. When he checks the club's security feeds and sees that you disappeared at the exact same moment I did, he won't just think you were a random waitress in the wrong place. He will think you are a spy." The reality of Gabriel's words hung in the air like a guillotine. "If Nathaniel thinks I'm a spy," Harper started, her voice shaking violently again. "He will authorize a scorched earth protocol to find you," Gabriel finished for her. He stood up, turning to Leo. "We need to move the timeline up. Nathaniel is going to use Trevor to track her. Trevor knows her habits, her friends, her family." "My mother," Harper gasped, jumping up from the sofa. "She lives in an assisted care facility in Naperville. Trevor knows the address. If they want to get to me—" "Leo," Gabriel barked. "Dispatch a 4-man extraction team to Naperville. Secure the mother. Move her to the secondary safe house in Wisconsin. No luggage, grab and go. Pay the facility director whatever it takes to wipe the security footage." "On it," Leo said, already dialing his encrypted phone as he walked toward the security monitors. Gabriel turned back to Harper. The brutal efficiency with which he operated was dizzying. He was like a machine, calculating variables and neutralizing threats with cold precision. It reminded Harper of the stories she had read about the old Chicago outfit men like Tony Accardo or Paul Ricca, who ruled the city through fear and flawless logistics. But Gabriel was a modern iteration, armed with digital ghosts and limitless offshore accounts. "Your mother will be safe within the hour," Gabriel said, his tone softening just a fraction. "I gave you my word, Harper. I cleaned the slate." Before Harper could even formulate a word of gratitude, the lights in the mansion flickered violently. A high-pitched, sustained beep echoed from the kitchen console. Leo dropped his phone. "Boss, we have a breach. Proximity sensors on the front gate just went dark. Thermal cameras are picking up 4 SUVs approaching the perimeter with their headlights off." Gabriel didn't flinch. He walked over to the marble island and calmly strapped his shoulder holster back on, checking the magazine of his customized Sig Sauer. "Nathaniel found us," Gabriel said. "He must have tracked the GPS node on the town car before we swept it. I underestimated his tech team. They're heavily armed, boss," Leo warned, his hands flying across the security console. "They're carrying automatic rifles. They aren't here for a sit-down. They're here to ensure the bomb plot dies with us," Gabriel replied. He walked over to a seemingly normal bookshelf, pulled a specific leather-bound volume, and the entire unit slid open to reveal a massive, heavily stocked armory. He pulled out a compact Heckler & Koch MP5 submachine gun, tossing it to Leo before grabbing a sleek black Glock 19. He walked over to Harper, grabbed her hand, and pressed the cold, heavy metal of the pistol into her palm. Harper recoiled, dropping the gun as if it were on fire. "No, I don't know how to use that. I can't shoot anyone." Gabriel picked it up from the floor, his eyes locking onto hers with a fierce, undeniable intensity. "I am not asking you to become a killer, Harper. I am asking you to survive. Keep the safety off. Point it at the center of mass and pull the trigger if someone who isn't me or Leo comes through that door. Understand?" He shoved it into the deep pocket of his coat that she was still wearing. A deafening explosion shattered the silence of the night. The heavy oak front doors of the mansion buckled inward, blown off their hinges by a breaching charge. Dust and smoke billowed into the grand foyer. "Through the basement!" Gabriel roared over the ringing in their ears. He grabbed Harper by the wrist, dragging her toward a hidden door disguised as wood paneling near the kitchen. Leo provided covering fire, the deafening rat-tat-tat of the MP5 echoing through the luxury home, shattering glass and tearing through drywall. Shouts of men returning fire filled the air. Harper ran blindly, stumbling over her own feet, kept upright only by Gabriel's iron grip. They plunged down a narrow, concrete staircase into pitch darkness. Gabriel kicked open a steel door at the bottom, leading them into a subterranean boat slip built directly into the cliffside. The water of Lake Michigan lapped gently against the hull of a sleek, blacked-out Chris Craft speedboat. "Get in!" Gabriel shoved her toward the boat. Harper scrambled aboard, tripping over the leather seats, landing hard on the fiberglass deck. Gabriel vaulted over the side a second later, his gun still drawn, eyes fixed on the stairwell. "Where is Leo?" Harper screamed over the sound of the boat's massive engines roaring to life as Gabriel hit the ignition. "Leo knows the rendezvous point." Gabriel shouted back, throwing the throttle forward. The speedboat shot out of the subterranean slip like a bullet, violently tearing through the water and launching out onto the open, freezing expanse of Lake Michigan. The icy spray whipped across Harper's face, stinging her bruised cheek. She looked back at the cliffside. High above, the windows of the $15 million mansion were glowing orange with gunfire and flames. Gabriel steered the boat aggressively into the pitch-black night, putting miles between them and the shore in minutes. The roar of the engine made conversation impossible, leaving Harper alone with her racing thoughts. She was a waitress who couldn't afford her rent. Now, she was a fugitive on a freezing lake, holding a loaded gun, on the run with the most dangerous man in Chicago. Gabriel slowed the boat down once the shoreline was nothing but a distant string of twinkling lights. The silence of the open water was deafening, broken only by the hum of the idling engine and the rhythmic slapping of the waves. He turned off the engine entirely. They drifted in the dark. Gabriel turned to her, the moonlight catching the hard, sharp angles of his face. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a cold, calculating reality. "Running only delays the inevitable," Gabriel said quietly, his breath forming white clouds in the freezing air. "Nathaniel won't stop. He has the manpower of the entire syndicate behind him, and he'll paint me as the traitor who abandoned the family." "What do we do?" Harper asked, her voice trembling, though this time it was from the cold rather than the fear. "We stop being the prey," Gabriel replied, his dark eyes burning with a terrifying resolve. "We need to call a parley with the commission, the 5 families. I need to prove Nathaniel's treason to the old bosses." "But how?" Harper asked. "It's just your word against his, and I'm just a waitress. They won't believe me." "No, they won't," Gabriel agreed bluntly. "Which means we don't bring them a witness. We bring them the weapon." He leaned closer, the scent of gunpowder and expensive cologne enveloping her. "We are going back into the city, Harper. We are going to find a man named Silas, the bomb maker, and we are going to make him confess in front of the most ruthless men in the country. Are you ready to hunt?" The Chris Craft speedboat cut through the icy black waters of Lake Michigan, finally slowing as Gabriel navigated toward a decaying, undocumented industrial pier near the rusted skeleton of the old Southworks steel mill. The clock on the dashboard read 3:14 a.m. The city skyline loomed in the distance, a glittering grid of oblivious millions, while a silent war raged in its shadows. Gabriel tied off the boat with practiced efficiency. "We need a rat," he said, his voice cutting through the freezing wind. "Nathaniel's inner circle is locked tight. But Trevor is a bottom feeder. Bottom feeders panic when the water gets bloody." Harper pulled the oversized wool coat tighter around her shivering frame, her hand instinctively brushing the heavy cold steel of the Glock in her pocket. "Trevor will be at the chop shop in Logan Square. Whenever he's in trouble with his bookies, he hides in the back office. He has a floor safe there." "Then that's where we hunt," Gabriel replied, leading her up the rusted iron ladders to the street level, where a secondary, discreet extraction vehicle, a nondescript gray sedan, had already been staged by one of his few remaining loyal lieutenants. The drive to Logan Square was suffocatingly tense. Harper stared out the window, watching the neon signs bleed through the frost on the glass. Just 48 hours ago, Trevor had backhanded her across the face for buying the wrong brand of coffee. Now, she was riding shotgun with the most feared man in the Chicago syndicate, heading back to confront her abuser. Gabriel parked 2 blocks away from Miller's Auto and Body. The neighborhood was dead silent, save for the distant wail of a police siren. They approached the cinder block building through the alleyway, the smell of stale motor oil and ozone heavy in the air. Gabriel didn't bother picking the lock of the reinforced steel back door. He pulled a suppressed compact pistol from his waistband, shot the locking mechanism twice in rapid succession, and kicked the heavy door open. They moved into the cavernous garage, navigating through a maze of half-dismantled luxury cars. Toward the back, a sliver of light spilled from beneath the office door. Gabriel breached the room silent. Trevor Miller was frantic. He was shoving stacks of banded $100 bills from an open floor safe into a stained canvas duffel bag. At the sound of the door opening, Trevor spun around, his hand darting toward a cheap revolver on the desk. Gabriel moved faster than humanly possible. He crossed the room in 2 strides, grabbed Trevor by the throat, and slammed him brutally against the faux wood paneling. The cheap revolver clattered to the linoleum floor. "Going somewhere, T-Bone?" Gabriel asked, his voice a lethal, silken whisper. Trevor's eyes bulged in pure terror as he recognized the boss of the Lombardi family. "Mr. Lombardi, I swear to God, I didn't know anything about the hit. Rossi just told me to keep my mouth shut and pack my bags." Harper stepped into the doorway, the harsh fluorescent light illuminating the dark, angry, purple bruise covering the left side of her face. Trevor stopped thrashing. His jaw dropped. "Harper? What the hell are you doing with him?" The old, manipulative sneer crept back onto his face, a desperate reflex. "Babe, tell him I'm just a mechanic. Tell him I don't know anything." Harper looked at the man who had terrorized her for 2 years. She felt a profound, sudden absence of fear. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the Glock Gabriel had given her, and pointed it squarely at Trevor's chest. Her hands, which had trembled all night, were now entirely still. "Where is Silas, Trevor?" Harper asked, her voice shockingly cold. Trevor swallowed hard, looking from the barrel of the gun to Gabriel's dead eyes. "The old Morton Salt facility. The abandoned annex by the river. That's where Silas builds the rigs." And Nathaniel called a sunrise sit-down with the commission. Jean and Giorgetti's, the private dining room. 5 a.m. "He's going to tell the old bosses that you fled the city, Mr. Lombardi, that you're a traitor." Gabriel smiled. It was a terrifying sight. He struck Trevor across the temple with the butt of his pistol, dropping the mechanic unconscious to the floor. "Leo's cleanup crew will deal with him," Gabriel muttered, stepping over the body. "We have a bomb maker to catch." An hour later, the gray sedan idled outside the iconic Jean and Giorgetti Steakhouse in River North. It was 5:15 a.m. The restaurant was closed to the public, but 3 massive, blacked-out SUVs guarded the perimeter. Inside, the Chicago Commission, 5 elderly, ruthless men who dictated the rules of the Midwestern underworld, were holding court. Gabriel popped the trunk of the sedan. Inside, Silas, the notorious explosives expert, lay bound and gagged, his face bruised from Gabriel's aggressive interrogation at the salt factory, clutching the very remote detonator that was supposed to end Gabriel's life. "Stay behind me," Gabriel told Harper, grabbing Silas by the collar and dragging the bomb maker toward the heavy mahogany doors of the restaurant. The guards at the door, recognizing Gabriel, instinctively stepped back, their hands hovering over their weapons but entirely unsure of what protocol to follow. Gabriel kicked the doors open. In the back dining room, engulfed in cigar smoke and the smell of expensive coffee, sat the 5 bosses. Vincent the Sphinx Coretti, the oldest and most powerful, sat at the head of the table. Standing at the opposite end, mid-speech, was Nathaniel Cross. Nathaniel froze, the color draining from his face as Gabriel strode into the room, throwing Silas onto the Persian rug. Harper stood quietly in the doorway, a ghost from the Onyx Club, watching the empire crumble. "Nathaniel was just telling us how you abandoned your post, Gabriel," Vincent rasped, his eyes darting to the bound man on the floor. "Nathaniel is a dead man breathing," Gabriel said smoothly, tossing the detonator onto the table. It clattered against the fine china. "That is Silas. He wired my Aston Martin with C4 6 hours ago, paid for by my underboss. I brought you the weapon, Vincent. And I brought you the confession." Nathaniel panicked. He reached inside his tailored suit jacket for his weapon. "Treason," Vincent Coretti whispered, casually waving a hand. Before Nathaniel could even clear his holster, the 2 commission enforcers standing in the corners of the room drew their weapons and fired. The deafening roar of the gunshots shattered the quiet morning. Nathaniel collapsed onto the hardwood floor, his blood pooling into the expensive rugs. Gabriel didn't flinch. He looked at the 5 bosses, asserting his absolute dominance over the room. The Lombardi family remained stable. I trust this concludes the sit-down. Vincent nodded slowly, a deep respect mirroring in his ancient eyes. It does, Gabriel. Your house is in order. Gabriel turned and walked back toward the entrance, offering his hand to Harper. She took it, feeling the warmth and undeniable power in his grip. They walked out into the freezing Chicago dawn together, leaving the smoke and the bodies behind. Harper Quinn walked into the onyx-tiled penthouse, the morning sun painting the Chicago skyline in hues of bruised purple and gold. The trembling waitress was dead, left behind in a soundproofed hallway. In her place stood a woman forged in a single night of fire and blood. Gabriel poured 2 glasses of bourbon, handing her one. He didn't see a pawn anymore. He saw his queen.